Hey guys, this is Chadley and Matt here at MetalWorks, and today we're going to be stepping you through the build of our 48 Chevy Fleetline. The Fleetline sits on an Art Morrison builder's chassis, and it's powered by a hot little 6-cylinder engine. If you're not familiar with what a builder's chassis is, that's great because we're going to definitely get into that during the commentary. So we're going to start you out with just a quick little video of the finished product of the Fleetline, then we're going to dive into the step-by-step process. So we encourage you just to sit back, relax, and watch the build unfold. Alright guys, again this is Charlie here at MetalWorks, and I'm joined by Matt. You just saw a quick video of the finished product of the Fleetline, and now here we are with the arrival of it at the shop.
This car arrived at the shop in this condition. The customer had found this as a nicely restored car, and he just wanted to make it nicer, wanted to get a different appearance and stance to it, so he brought it to us to sit it on Art Morrison chassis.
And here we can see that we're going to start the teardown of the body and removal off the original chassis. So Matt, can you kind of give us a little breakdown about what happens here?
Yeah, so at this step what we do is we're going to break down all the front end sheet metal off of it, basically get it down to a bare shell so it's ready to be fitted to the new Art Morrison chassis.
And also I imagine we do a lot of bagging and tagging.
Yes, all the parts that come off the vehicle are all clearly identified and marked. That way they can be reinstalled later easily. Evaluate what needs to be repaired as it comes off if any repairs are needed.
You can see the floors now. It was really a nice solid car.
Yes, this car actually, if you look underneath, is very solid, pretty rust free. The outside of the car was in really nice shape.
Here you can see the guys just starting to lift it off that original chassis. So here we're going to go into the arrival of the Art Morrison chassis. And again, this is what's known as a builder's chassis. Maybe Matt, you can explain that a little bit.
Yeah, so a builder's chassis is a chassis that's a chassis built to the customer's specifications and measurements. They typically, so a builder chassis does not have the body mounts installed on it. That's to be done once you receive the chassis. Same with the motor mounts and bumper mounting. There are a few other small parts that need to be mounted to it, but this one will have the profile that you call out on it so it can fit underneath your car.
So you're still getting your suspension and all that kind of stuff, just basically not set up for motor mounts, body mounts.
Yes, so how we like to dress them out is you get the builder chassis. The builder chassis will have all the suspension already installed on it. The 4-link rear suspension, the 9-inch fork housing, the front independent suspension with rack and pinion steering. Typically coilovers. This particular version is a airbag suspension. He did want a very low stance to this, but still be able to drive it, so we chose air ride on this one.
Okay. So now we're going to start mocking up the Morrison chassis to the body.
So right here you'll see the outriggers that just passed by. Those are the body mounts to mount to the chassis to allow us some body mounting points. And you'll see those later in the video as well when we're tacking them on and getting them placed where they're supposed to be.
I can see you cut the spare tire well out of the car.
Yes, so there's always trimming involved when you do a builder chassis, some more than others. This one didn't require extensive modification. We did have to do the trunk floor and some clearance for the rear suspension, but when you're setting these on, you always want to cut the minimum amount possible to start to get it set over the chassis, and then after you get it set down over the chassis, that's when you're going to come back and reevaluate, see how much more you want to cut out to clean everything up.
Gotcha. Yeah, so you can see he's starting to do some cutting there, and the body's dropping down onto the chassis a little bit more.
So you can see here, it's not quite all the way down there. They cut the rear cross member out to get it all the way down in between the two wheel wells there. A little more trimming here to get it to fit a little nicer in there. This will all be cleaned up later on. You'll see it later in the video how we've cleaned this up and rebuilt the structure around here. But again, this is just for the mock-up purpose so we can get to the body mounting.
So there you can see that he's actually cut into the body there a little bit. I'm assuming those areas will have to be addressed later.
Yes, this is the floor pan brace, so to get it down where we wanted it on the body, we needed to do a little trimming there, and yes, we will see that later in the video how that was dressed up. And again, those are the body mounts that we just saw there. Here we are trimming the body mount to fit the dimension we need to weld it to the chassis. There it is, welded to the chassis there. Typically, when we do these, we'll just tack them in place. These are not finish welded yet. We did do a couple finish welds, but they're not completely welded. We'll wait for that until after the body comes off to where we can access all those areas well and do a proper weld around the full bracket. There you see one tacked in place.
So not as slick as a GT Sport, but not terrible by any means.
Yeah, you know, a GT Sport is meant to be more of a direct bolt-on type chassis. The things that you do find in the Art Morrison catalog are the GT Sport bolt-on chassis like Tri-5, Chevelles, Corvettes, what have you, truck chassis. This one does require some more work, but it gives you an option for cars that don't have a chassis available for them.
Yeah. So it looks like Tom had to trim the inner fender wells a little bit for the suspension.
Yes. Had to clear the new A-arms as the new suspension is different in the front now. This is trimming the front of the frame horn off to allow for a new bumper bracket location here. Again, like I said before, the bumper brackets do have to be fabricated to fit the original bumpers. And there we are hanging the front bumper on there now. And this one actually got a 6-cylinder in it. Not real common to do 6-cylinder. Most of them are V8s, but this one the customer wanted to use a 6-cylinder he already had built for this car. Has a automatic overdrive going in behind it.
Yeah, it was cool. That the 6-cylinder really flowed with the Fleetline.
And you'll see again, here's some more trimming involved. So on this one we had to relieve the firewall to allow clearance for that engine. It's very close on the carburetors, but the head itself and the valve cover did not clear. So, and again, we'll address that and talk a little bit more about that later in this video of how we address that.
So this is Tom building the engine mounts then?
Yes, this is the engine mounts going in. So again, the engine mounts have to be done on a builder chassis. On a GT Sport chassis, they'll already be installed. And this is a core support bracket that's being welded in place here to locate the front clip of that vehicle. And like we said before, this is an air ride suspension car, so most of them we do are coilover, but this is an option if you want a very low stance and still be able to drive it.
It looks like he did an airbag up front and more of an air sleeve in the back.
Yes, that's how these are designed. You can see the air sleeve there. Now has an independent shock there. So you can see again, minimum amount cut out there, just enough to get that fit and located where we want it. Very tight clearance in the wheel well, so we opted to do a wheel tub on this one. We'll be cutting those wheel wells out there. They are being cut out there, and we'll add in some inner wheel tubs in there to clear the new tires that are going on the car.
So it's essentially a mini tub?
Yes, this will be a mini tub when it's done. We're going to bring the wheel tubs in to be basically to where the frame rail is there, to allow for maximum tire width in there. And of course, with this car, the engine transmission combination, as we were talking about, the firewall had to be modified, as well as the floor pan for the tunnel area. We had to do a little kick up there to allow for that new transmission in.
That's pretty common in any, I think, later model motor. In an early car, you're going to have to fillet the tranny tunnel or something to make room for the bigger components.
Yes, that is common. You know, even in some of the GT Sport chassis, when we're talking about putting more modern transmissions in, like the 4L80 transmissions or the T56 6-speed, sometimes there are some modifications needed to the tunnel. And this one, of course, needs the firewall, as you see here. We've made a new panel in there to allow clearance for the new motor now.
So you can see Tom, he's laying out with the pressed board, then he fabricates out of metal. We kind of joke that it's arts and crafts, but that just makes for a really nice piece when it's all said and done.
So here are the wheel tubs being manufactured. He's made this flange, so with the shrinker stretcher here, you'll see that he's actually manipulated the sheet metal to wrap around that wheel well. This will give us a good landing point for the new wheel tub to go in place. He went a little extra on this one, rolled the edges on it to give it a nice rounded corner on the edge, as you see here. TIG welded all together, and you have a nice finished product there. Once this is all done, you'll see this flange that he had shaped for the body structure for this to land on. Right here, that flange is being installed. That's just screwed in place initially, then we go back and plug weld it and weld it. Then that gives us a good landing point to put that new wheel tub in. So now we're going to want to have a flange all the way around this bottom floor pan area too, for a new floor pan to have a landing point as well. He has trimmed and cut and made a whole new floor pan in here. As you can see, we've cut the original one completely out to opt for a new one to give it a nicer, better appearance when we're all done.
So he threw some bead rolls in there, just stiffen things up.
Correct. It keeps the metal from flexing so much, so it's quieter this way and definitely a much more solid panel. And again, you'll see him, he screws everything together here to come back and plug weld that later. That way he can get it all placed in there, make sure everything lines up, then come back and do his finished weld once he confirms everything fits.
You can see the panhard bar there poking up through the floor.
Yeah, we had to do a little blister there. We didn't want to kick the floor pan up any more than we had to, so we just did a blister there to cover that up, because we knew we had air ride components going in the trunk, so we wanted to save as much space as we could.
Yeah. The blister actually, I think, looks really cool. So
yeah, absolutely. You'll see the 4-bar suspension came up underneath the rear seat area there a little bit, so we had to cover that up as well. I wouldn't say this was an extensive amount of fabrication on this one. Some of the builder chassis, you do have to cut the entire floor pan out of the entire car. This one required the trunk to be trimmed out and finished.
yeah, the end product looks fantastic.
Yeah, so we were able to keep the original floor pan in the entire front section. Here we have the rear body mounts going on, rear bumper mounting done. You can see we had to kick the frame rail out to a wider width to allow for that the correct landing point for the bumper brackets there.
So now you can see the gas tank is in place. So is that still the stock gas tank?
You know, I believe this is the stock gas tank, and you'll see the gas tank brackets there. I believe we took those off the original car and put them back on. Don't quote me on that, but I believe this is the original one.
But oftentimes we'll have to run a different style tank.
Yeah, a lot of times we do an aftermarket, like stainless steel tank with the fuel injection provision in it with the fuel injection pump. It just depends on what fits the build the best. On this particular one, it was a carbureted car, so we were able to use an OE style tank very easily.
So it looks like I've seen them hanging the vintage air box. I know that's
Yep.
a piece of choice here at the shop for air conditioning.
Yeah, so here we're doing, we haven't pulled the body off the frame yet, but we're going to go ahead and do some mock-up of other components while it's all one piece still. This way there's less cutting and welding potential later on in the build. We can get all our holes drilled, all our welding done before this gets torn down for the finished welding work.
Yeah, you can imagine on a full restoration, when you made a freshly painted body back to the chassis, you definitely don't want to be cutting any holes at that point.
Exactly. Get as much stuff as you can mock up initially that you can. Like right here, you'll see we're doing all the exhaust system. While it's together, it gives us an opportunity to get all that in there and prove that it all fits. This one has a single exhaust off that 6-cylinder, that split header, doing single exhaust. All mandrel bent, TIG welded together.
Maybe you saw there how the exhaust pipe runs through a clearance hole right through the Morrison chassis. That's really slick.
Yeah, we had to get a little tricky on that one, get the steering and the exhaust through that small opening. And as we were talking before, this is where we wanted the extra clearance. We had an air ride system going in the back to control all the airbags, the pumps, compressors, what have you. So that's why we wanted the extra clearance back there. And the customer wanted more of an original look to the car, so we opted the Koi's wheels to give us a nice smooth wheel with polished lip and a hubcap center to kind of keep that vintage look.
But now this is a larger diameter wheel.
Yes, this is an 18-inch wheel, so we can get a bigger wheel that will perform better. A lot of tire options when we get into like an 18 size wheel.
Yeah, so like Matt said, you're keeping that nostalgic era look, but in a modern sized wheel, a modern performing wheel. So it's a neat setup.
So again, more mock-up in here. As many components you can fit in here. This is doing the brake on the brake master cylinder on the firewall. Get all your fuse panels mounted. Get your master cylinder mounted. Any linkages, steering column. This is the best time to do all this. That way we can do all our firewall modifications. As you can see here, that firewall is actually getting modified a second time here. This one, the first time we did it, unfortunately, we made a mistake. We didn't allow enough room for clearance of the valve cover to come off, so we went back and revised that and allowed that firewall to come up higher to allow for maintenance later of that valve cover coming off.
So it looks like they're smoothing off, filling in some holes that don't need to be there anymore.
Correct. Just making a cleaner look. We don't need all the original holes in there because with the new AC, it's going to have a new wiring system in there, so all that won't be required anymore. And here you see, now we have the body off the chassis, and this is the ideal time to do all your finish welding. This is when you can access all the areas and do a proper weld on all the brackets, all the additional things you had to do on the car, on the body. These are all not accessible when the body's on there. So initially you just tack it in place, get it all located, and then the body comes off later. We can get all that finished up once the body's off. This is a lower floor brace. Again, we get that plated back in once that body gets lifted off. And here it is, ready for disassembly. You see all the mounts on there, all the fabrication we did. We're going to tear this thing down, get it ready for paint at this point. Tagging back all the components, set those to the side so we can get this chassis painted up. Now we do choose typically to paint these chassis, and there's a couple of reasons for that. A lot of people ask me why we don't powder coat these, and powder coating, the problem with powder coating is that how do you repair powder coat? With paint, you can go back and do a repair on paint. You can't go back and re-powder coat. The other thing is powder coat will build more thickness, so sometimes the bolts don't fit through the holes like they should, so you have to go back and clean those out. So the paint is definitely a much better option in our opinion. And we can also, on these chassis, you see this one's a nice satin black. As an option, we can do these custom colors. If you have a particular color you need done or want to match a body color, that definitely can be done on the chassis as well. So now the chassis is all painted, we're going to put this thing back together. All our mock-ups pre-wall already done, so at this point it's really nice because everything just bolts on, and we will be ready to accept a body on this again here very soon.
Now correct me if I'm wrong, but we go through and torque check all and mark all the bolts on the chassis.
Yes, so as we're assembling, you'll see marks over all the bolts. We will go through and torque them properly and then mark them to identify that they have been torqued. Now, as you know, we did some firewall modifications on this one, so now we're going to go back and do a little body work, clean up the holes we welded shut, clean up the interior. We're going to also go through the whole underside of this car, and we're going to clean up the whole underside because that was really the only part that didn't look as pretty. By cleaning off the whole bottom side, now he has a much nicer product when it's all done. We'll go through on the bottom side, you'll notice it will have a nice coating. We use what it's called a Raptor coating. It has a nice textured finish. Looks really nice and clean under the car. It's easy to maintain and it holds up very well. Here's the whole bottom of the car cleaned up, getting ready for that Raptor coat there.
So the Raptor coating, it protects and also is like sound and heat deadening.
No heat dampening capability on it. It will help a little bit for sound. I wouldn't say it's significant. More than anything, it just gives it a much nicer appearance. As you can see, that now this looks brand new on the bottom side of the car. The texture coat will also hide any small imperfections you might have in there. You'll see the firewalls now painted up really nice to the original color of the car. So when this thing all goes back together, it will appear like we haven't done anything to it.
So at this point, we're pretty much to a rolling chassis, and this is actually a version of how we would sell a chassis to a customer.
Yes, we do a lot of rolling chassis. A rolling chassis would be a chassis that is similar to what you see here. It'd be painted, assembled with third member, axles, brakes, steering, basically ready to accept a body when the customer receives it. As you can see here, we're putting the exhaust back on that we already mocked up previously. So again, it's more of a bolt together type situation now. All the pieces are going to bolt together, but it's already been done back in fabrication.
Looks like all the air ride lines have been ran, plumbed.
Yes, it would get all the plumbing done at this stage. It's much easier than when the body's on it. So now the body's all finished, we can set the body on there. It's going to just set right down on there and bolt directly up. Because again, we've already done all our mock-up on this. We've proven everything fits. Now you can see that mates right up to the chassis very well.
Man, that looks good.
Yeah, you can see this has a very, very low stance to it. You wouldn't be able to do that without the airbags. Now you can see the front clips going back on. All the original sheet metal goes right back on that chassis since we've mocked it all up. You can see the much wider tire in there now.
Again, our customer opted for an OEM style interior, which really looks great in the car. And they're just dialing in the last bit of wiring and final assembly.
So this car, when it leaves here, it will have essentially all new suspension, whole new chassis. It'll have all new wiring. Most of the upholstery is original. We just recarpeted it, and I think we redid the rear seat in there to allow a subwoofer box underneath. But essentially, the whole drivetrain is brand new in this car. All the wiring, all the crucial parts are brand new, but it still has the original appearance to it. Now this car turned out just absolutely amazing. The stance of this car, it just really has a neat look to it. It has like I said, it has the original look just like when it came in, but a much lower stance like what the customer wanted. This was just, I absolutely love this car. This is a really neat car.
And the video you saw at the beginning, I was a lucky guy that got to drive it, and just a fantastic cruising car, so smooth. That Morrison chassis just makes the car an absolute joy to drive.
Yeah, that is one thing. It's the Morrison chassis. They will perform, but they'll also drive very comfortable and very smooth.
So again, we'd like to thank you guys for checking out the video here. And if you have any questions regarding Art Morrison chassis or a potential build here at the shop, give us a call. You'll talk directly to Matt or John. And you can reach us here at 541-341-3372. And again, we appreciate it. We'll talk to you guys soon.